When investigators first entered Gene Hackman's Santa Fe mansion, they expected a routine check, perhaps a few personal items, some art, and quiet memories of a Hollywood icon's later years. What they found was anything but ordinary. Hidden behind a thick wooden panel, they discovered a mysterious black safe that didn't appear on any official list or household record. No one seemed to know it even existed. Yet the real shock came after they forced it open, revealing a trove of documents and a final letter that would challenge everything the world believed about Gene Hackman. These weren't just faded scripts or old contracts. Tucked inside were pages labeled confidential, strange photographs capturing silent meetings between famous faces, and a letter in Hackman's own handwriting, a haunting note that hinted at secrets too dangerous to share. There were also names, dozens of them, stars who vanished without explanation, powerful figures who either fell off the grid or were quietly removed from public life. Scribbled in the margins were cryptic symbols, as if Hackman was building a hidden map of Hollywood's darkest corners. From the moment the safe's door swung open, the investigators felt the gravity of what they'd uncovered. This wasn't a simple stash of keepsakes from a retired legend. It was evidence of a sprawling network that might reach far beyond one actor's private home. Why had Hackman kept such files hidden? And who or what had he been preparing to expose? The questions pile up as fast as the rumors. Was he gathering proof to protect himself? Was he on the verge of blowing the lid off an industry that stops at nothing to silence those who know too much? The deeper you look, the more unnerving it gets. Each photograph, each half-burnt page seems to tell a story of power plays and secret agreements, forging a chain that connects Hollywood's brightest lights to unimaginable darkness. As the dust settles in that Santa Fe mansion, one reality looms large. Gene Hackman might have taken certain secrets to his grave, but the evidence he left behind is more alive and more dangerous than anyone could have anticipated. The only question now is whether the truth will stay locked up in the shadows or finally explode into the open, bringing one of Hollywood's oldest conspiracies to light. From the outside, Gene Hackman's Santa Fe mansion looked every bit the peaceful retreat of a Hollywood legend seeking solitude in his twilight years. Nothing hinted at the secrets buried within. Yet when police arrived for what they assumed was a routine inspection, they couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that something was off. The layout of the house seemed deliberate, as though every nook had been designed to hide more than it revealed. Then, in Hackman's study, they noticed a faint seam in the wooden paneling near a row of books. One firm push on that subtle gap revealed a small, concealed door, its edges worn just enough to suggest someone had opened it before. Behind that panel, they found the imposing black safe. It had no visible keyhole, no combination pad, and no paperwork to verify its existence. Even Betsy Arakawa's records offered no clue that such a thing was part of their home. At first, the investigators thought it might hold some private keepsakes or even valuable paintings, but once they called in a specialized team to drill through its fortified steel, they realized they were dealing with something far more troubling. Stacks of manila folders, sealed envelopes marked strictly confidential, and a lone letter in Hackman's own unmistakable handwriting were piled inside. Scrawled across the top of one folder was the phrase, "Not to be opened," as if warning intruders of what lay within. The entire discovery felt surreal. This was the same Gene Hackman who had retired quietly, content to paint and write, leaving Hollywood glitz behind. Yet here was a safe that looked more fitting for top-secret espionage than a retired actor's den. In the days that followed, the authorities realized this wasn't a mere trove of personal memorabilia. It was a portal into a hidden realm of deals, vanished stars, and unsettling truths. Nothing prepared them for the revelations to come, and as word spread of the safe's existence, a new, more pressing question arose. Who else might have been searching for it, and how far would they go to keep its contents locked away forever? When officers finally pried open Hackman's secret safe, they expected family documents or private letters, perhaps a hidden will at most. Instead, they found a set of files so bizarre and unsettling that even seasoned investigators were taken aback. Among them were what appeared to be old Hollywood contracts, stamped with ornate seals and signed in red ink that looked unnervingly like blood. The text contained language no reputable lawyer would ever draft: lifetime obligations, absolute compliance clauses, and dire warnings about the consequences of defiance. Mixed in were black and white photographs of high-profile producers and studio executives at what seemed to be private gatherings. Scribbled captions mentioned closed-door negotiations, followed by cryptic references to final offers and unspoken debts. Some were dated as far back as the 1970s, while others looked more recent. Each was tagged with a code that didn't match any known studio labeling system, leading investigators to wonder if they were personal records Hackman kept for a reason no one could fathom. Woven throughout these files were hints of supernatural or cult-like undertones. One contract contained a faint watermark resembling a strange symbol, while a few typed pages mentioned an enigmatic council that might have overseen these dealings. Whether any of it was real or a twisted rumor turned into myth remained unclear, but what was undeniable is that Hackman had protected these papers with utmost care. Had he stumbled upon them during his heyday in Hollywood, or was he collecting these eerie contracts to shield himself, or perhaps others, from an unseen force? Even as police tried to piece together the puzzle, one thought kept echoing. If this is what Gene Hackman chose to hide, just how much darker was the truth he left unspoken? Amid the unsettling contracts and shadowy photos lay a single file that seemed even more ominous, a worn folder marked simply as names. Leafing through its contents, investigators found pages filled with the names of actors, directors, and producers. Some household favorites, others obscure, but each labeled with haunting annotations. Certain entries were underlined in red with the word missing, while others bore harsh stamps like silenced or blacklisted. A few had question marks or strange symbols beside them, suggesting their stories were still mysteries, even to Hackman. As they cross-referenced these names, the evidence pointed to an eerie pattern. Many had abruptly vanished from Hollywood or fallen into disgrace right when they seemed on the verge of success. Some disappeared without explanation. Others were rumored to have run-ins with powerful studio heads, only to fade from view entirely. One starlet had a promising career before dropping off the radar in the late 1980s. Her final recorded interview hinted at dark corners of this industry. Another was a visionary director who suddenly abandoned all projects, with no trace of him afterward except a fleeting mention in a tabloid about internal conflicts. What possessed Gene Hackman to collect these names, and why so meticulously? Was he documenting an undercurrent of forced disappearances, or was this list a reminder of those who dared to speak and paid the price? Investigators were left with more questions than answers. If these vanished stars had been silenced, who had the power to make it happen? And more importantly, could Hackman himself have been next on that list had he tried to expose it all? As investigators dug deeper into Gene Hackman's secret stash, they realized parts of the story were missing. Literally, certain documents and photographs showed signs of being torn out or carefully removed. Some contracts were missing entire sections, leaving behind cryptic fragments that hinted at bigger, more explosive details. Even the names folder, with its chilling list of vanished stars, appeared incomplete, as though someone had ripped away the pages containing the most damning evidence. A faint scratch on the study's lock and a telltale drag mark near the safe suggested that an intruder might have slipped into the mansion before the authorities arrived. Whoever it was seemed to know exactly what to take and how to vanish without leaving behind any clear trace. The realization that someone beat them to the punch sent a jolt of urgency through the investigation. If the stolen evidence was that critical, then the documents Hackman left behind were probably just the tip of a much larger iceberg. The question was, who had both the means and the motive to break into Gene Hackman's home so soon after his death? And more importantly, what bombshell truths might still be out there, now hidden away in someone else's hands? Investigators could only guess at the secrets lost to this mystery thief, but the implications were enough to make even the most skeptical officer wonder if a far-reaching power was working to keep Hollywood's darkest dealings in the shadows. No matter the cost. Out of every strange artifact discovered in that clandestine safe, one piece felt the most personal and unassuming sheet of paper covered in Gene Hackman's hurried handwriting. It wasn't printed or typed like the rest. It wasn't stamped confidential or stuffed into a crisp manila folder. Instead, it appeared almost like a desperate confession, tucked into the very bottom of the safe as though Hackman had wrestled with whether to include it at all. The letter began with a startling admission: "I never wanted to know what I've come to learn." His words offered a window into a much larger and more ominous world than the public imagined. Hackman wrote about secrets hidden in studio backrooms, of whispered agreements designed to ensure certain stories never reached the spotlight. He insisted there were forces within Hollywood that thrived on fear and obedience, forces that had turned bright stars into silent shadows when they refused to toe the line. The letter trembled with a mix of dread and resolution, each sentence revealing how aware Hackman was of the peril he faced in holding these documents. He specifically mentioned the missing pages, suggesting they could well be the most damning of all, and implying that a silent hand had moved ahead of the authorities to ensure they remained hidden. Throughout, Hackman's voice wavered between regret and urgency. On one line, he mourned the innocence of an industry he once revered. On another, he implored whoever found his note to stay vigilant, to recognize that what he'd collected was only a fraction of the whole truth. The conclusion was a chilling warning. If you're reading this, then I wasn't fast enough. That single sentence echoed a final resignation. Hackman seemed to know he wouldn't escape the storm gathering around him, that his decades of stardom and respect wouldn't protect him from what lurked behind Hollywood's glamorous facade. In that one tragic confession, he revealed his deepest fear, that after spending a lifetime on the world stage, he might still die unheard. His revelations swept back under the glitzy carpet of an industry that devours its own. As the investigators pieced through the evidence, those unsettling contracts, the vanished stars list, and Gene Hackman's final plea, a much darker tapestry began to take shape. The more they read, the more it seemed that Hollywood's worst rumors might be more than just stories told in hushed tones behind the scenes. Hackman's files suggested a system entrenched deep within the film industry, one capable of controlling careers, silencing dissent, and erasing those who refused to comply. It went far beyond the usual gossip about ruthless producers or manipulative agents. This was a labyrinth of whispered deals and shadowy figures who thrived on absolute secrecy. Some documents referenced gatherings that felt downright clandestine, held late at night at remote estates or in private screening rooms. These secret meetings supposedly decided which films got made and, more chillingly, who in Hollywood was allowed to flourish or fade. A few famous names popped up in these notes, individuals who once had dazzling upward trajectories before they abruptly vanished or fell from grace. Hackman's annotations hinted at a sinister explanation. They'd either refused to sign on to certain arrangements or had threatened to speak out about something they'd witnessed. According to Hackman's scribbles, that was enough to seal their fate. What made the conspiracy even more disturbing was its subtlety. Instead of leaving obvious clues, it operated under a veneer of normal industry practice. Meetings were chalked up to negotiation sessions, suspicious disappearances rebranded as creative differences, and potential whistleblowers labeled difficult or unreliable until they lost credibility. Even if an actor or director tried to raise alarm, who would believe them in the face of major studio PR machines and powerful lawyers? For Hackman, the stakes were painfully clear. Decades ago, he had been one of Tinseltown's most commanding talents. With awards and respect came access to rooms and conversations the average person never knew existed. Over time, he must have realized those private talks held darker implications. According to various notes he made in the margins of certain documents, he'd watched colleagues be coaxed into signing impossible contracts or face the threat of blacklisting. The more he observed, the more he saw how fragile success in Hollywood truly was. How the largest studios and most influential backers seemed to operate under one relentless premise: obey or vanish. And so he gathered documents, photographed suspicious gatherings, and traced the fates of those who stood up to the machine. Based on his final letter and the carefully curated files, it appears Hackman wasn't necessarily trying to expose the entire conspiracy himself. Maybe he felt powerless against an apparatus that huge, or maybe he feared harming those who still worked under its yoke. Instead, he stashed the evidence as a lifeline, for himself, for anyone else who might dare to question the official Hollywood narrative. What the investigators found inside that hidden safe wasn't just a single scandal. It was an entire ecosystem built on secrets. The deeper they looked, the more unnerving it became. Every name on the vanished stars list and each blood-inked contract seemed to confirm the same unsettling reality. There was a hidden power in Hollywood that answered to no one, and it had been operating for years, possibly decades. Hackman, knowing the peril of standing against it, left behind only partial clues and that haunting final note. Whether he hoped it would one day bring the truth to light or serve as a warning to future victims, one certainty remained: whoever controlled this network was capable of shutting down even the brightest legends. In that uneasy hush, as they filed the papers and tried to comprehend the magnitude of what Gene Hackman had discovered, one lingering question pulsed in everyone's mind. If a man of his stature and influence couldn't stop this conspiracy, then who could? Even if they mustered the courage to try? As investigators closed the final folder and sealed off Gene Hackman's Santa Fe mansion, an unsettling realization hung in the air. The more they learned, the clearer it became that they were dealing with only a fraction of the story. So many questions remained unanswered. Who had snuck in and removed those missing pages before the police arrived? Were there other secret safes, hidden files, or even living witnesses out there who possessed the vital pieces of Hackman's puzzle? And most disturbingly, had Hollywood's silent enforcers already shifted their focus elsewhere, leaving Hackman's revelations as a mere footnote to the next far-reaching agenda? For now, law enforcement could only label it all inconclusive. Still, Hackman's personal documents, eerie contracts, and that harrowing roster of vanished stars refused to fade into irrelevance. The legend of his final days, of a man determined to leave behind a warning, yet too wary to unleash the full truth, lingered like a dark cloud over the bright lights of Tinseltown. Whispers spread that perhaps Hackman hadn't died a simple death at all, that the same unseen hand behind those cryptic papers had finally come for him. Official reports dismissed such rumors, but the raw tension in the investigators' eyes told a different story. In many ways, Hollywood marches on, as it always has, forging new stars and burying old scandals with each award season. Yet thanks to the discoveries inside Hackman's mansion, doubt has begun to creep into the public's mind. Audiences can't help but wonder, if these documents ever come to light, would they unravel the entire foundation of the entertainment empire? Or would those in power manage once again to spin the truth, the same way they've handled countless scandals before? In the end, Gene Hackman's hidden safe stands as a chilling symbol for the secrets we choose to ignore and the lengths to which certain forces will go to ensure those secrets remain locked away. Whether the world will ever witness the true extent of what Hackman found is uncertain, but one thing is brutally clear. Behind Hollywood's polished facade lies a shadowy domain that takes no prisoners, and if the contents of that safe are any indication, no one who steps into that realm is ever truly safe.